Hello and welcome back to Let's Play Final Fantasy Record Keeper. On the previous episode, I showed you some of the basics of the game and how to construct a team. And I walk you through the first few battles of the easy side of the Battle on the Big Bridge Challenge event, which is still ongoing today. So let's go ahead and jump in and see what's going on, if anything new is started since my last episode. So, of course, from the music you can tell the Battle on the Big Bridge is still going on, but if you look at this window over here, it says Challenge Event The Lord of Crags. And of course, it also reminds you the Dawn over the Big Bridge event is still going on. Lord of Crags is a Final Fantasy XIV themed event, themed around the battle against the primal Titan, similar to the Summon Titan, who appears in some of the previous Final Fantasy games. And I think I'd like to show you a little bit of this just to walk you through the general structure of the usual weekly events that differ from the boss rush that we're getting right now in Dawn over the Big Bridge. But first, since we walked through the first easy battles in Dawn over the Big Bridge, for some continuity, let's go ahead and see, as we count down to Happy New July, what new bosses had debuted on the bridge. So, of course, in the last episode, we finished by fighting Golbez, who is a difficulty 60 boss, at the 5th span. And so now here on the 4th span, we have Yunalesca from Final Fantasy X, who is difficulty 75. Quite a big step up from Golbez, 15 units. And she's actually surprisingly difficult, even for a very high-level party. Arguably somewhat more difficult to master for a high-level party than for someone a little bit lower. Like, still relatively high-level, but not like level 80 to level 70 to 80 like my team is. And the reason for that is in her mechanics. So if you're not familiar with the original fight with Yunalesca in Final Fantasy X, she was a 3-phase fight. In the first fight, she was just a mage, more or less. But in the second fight, she would inflict your characters with a zombie status. And then in the 3rd phase, she would use death on your party members who weren't zombied, meaning that if you tried to cure the status, you would just die. And then if you kept the zombie status on, she would use cure spells, since, you know, those, generally speaking, just like it is for enemies, if your characters are zombies, they're vulnerable to cure magic. So zombie status doesn't exist in Record Keeper, so they fake it a bit and maintain and implement the mechanics from the original fight by having her use this attack Hellbiter, the same attack that I think inflicts zombie in 10, to inflict sap on all your heroes at the same time. I believe she used this as an instant action when she does her first transformation in this fight too, which should usually inflict sap on all your party members. I don't think there are any accessories in this game that make you immune to sap, so it also has a 100% infliction rate. And then she uses Megadeth in her 3rd form, also as an instant action when she makes that transformation. The problem is if you have a very high-level team, sometimes I think it's actually possible to skip the 2nd fight if you use a really powerful limit break that does enough damage. I think she's got about 90,000 hit points, so it's not that hard to just pass through an entire phase. And also, Hellbiter can just miss if your character's agility is too high. And as you can see down here, the target score is to beat her without being KO'd. So of course, if you aren't sapped and she uses Megadeth and kills someone, you don't get the target score and you don't get mastery for this event, meaning you don't get the mastery reward part of the rewards for this battle. Usually, when you're doing an event, there are some trash mobs before the boss, meaning you have a little wiggle room in terms of medals that you can lose for mastery, but since the battle on the Big Bridge is just the boss rush and every single battle is just the boss, you are in a lot of trouble if you don't get your entire party sapped. So let's go ahead and enter and see if we can mitigate this in any way. So before I started this video, I was actually using a full summoner team because I was exploring one of the main storyline dungeons, for which it was very useful to have a lot of AoE attacks. So I was using Aiko, Renoa, Yuna, Hope, and Terra all as summoners. So Hope, Renoa, and Terra are spec'd as summoners for their respective games. You'd think that since everybody in Final Fantasy VIII and 13 and 6 can use summons, that they would implement this in Record Keeper the same way, but that would make all the characters operate kind of the same. So only specific characters from those respective games can actually use the Summon School of Magic. They've chosen Renoa for 8, they've chosen Hope for 13, they've chosen Terra and a couple of other characters, I think, for 6, because 6 is a huge cast, so they have a lot of schools to go around. Let's pick a team that we can use. I think there are 3 new battles in the Battle on the Big Bridge, so I'd like to walk through them all. So let's, besides Aiko, let's bring Red 13, because why not? Let's bring Yuffie. Oops. If you click on someone, if you hold the button down on somebody, you actually will get to view their status, so that's pretty helpful. Let's leave Yuna, because she's a summoner, and because Yuna and Yunalesca are nemesis, of course, in the main Final Fantasy game. Let's bring Zack, because we have an X in 13 and we have a Y in Yuna, so we should have a Z that follows Y. And let's bring Sephiroth, because he is the greatest man who ever lived. Alright, that should be good enough for this fight. So let's go back. I think most of these characters should be partially equipped, so I should be in pretty good shape. This again is a Final Fantasy X event, so it's very helpful to have Final Fantasy X Final Fantasy X equipment. Let's go ahead and find our FF10 equipment. Yeah, well, I guess I only have a couple of pieces of armor. Let's give him this shield here. I guess it's a bracer. Red 13 is kind of has a weird equipment selection. He can use a few of his hairpins. He is the only character who can use hairpins, and there are only a handful of them in the game. They're all 5-star relics that correspond to some of his, that are given away during Final Fantasy VII events that have Red 13 in them. But he can also use fists and daggers, which doesn't make a huge amount of sense. But I do have a fist for Final Fantasy X. It's one of Riku's weapons. So Riku and Red 13 start with the same letter, so let's give them the same weapon. Yuffie, I think, can use swords or katanas, and I have one of Auron's katanas, so let's give her that. Let's see what I'm missing. Yuna, I have 2 of Yuna's staves, so let's give her the famous Magistral Rod, the one that she's using in the promotional material for Final Fantasy X and on the cover. Seems like it makes enough sense. Zack, I think, can use fists and swords, so I have a lot of options for him. I have one of Tidus' swords. So I'm basically going to take all the items that Final Fantasy X characters actually use and give them to people from the different game, because why not? Alright, so I have a bracer here that he can use. That's a light armor. Okay, so I guess it makes sense that Red 13 can't use light armor, he can only use bracers, because he doesn't have a torso like a human being. That kind of makes sense to me, but for some definition of sense. So Sephiroth has a very limited equipment pool. It balances the fact that he has the highest strength in the game, and also the fact that he is amazing. So he can use only daggers and katanas, I think. But I do have a dagger for 10. I think it was given away as a free event during the anniversary of the game. That's why it's called the Celebration Blade. There definitely is not a Celebration Blade, I think, in Final Fantasy X itself. Let's see if we can find a good piece of equipment for him. So the easiest way, I don't think I have any Final Fantasy X equipment that Sephiroth can use that I haven't already given to another character. So the best way to find a powerful piece of equipment is just to sort by descending rarity, because the higher rarity pieces of equipment are obviously going to be more powerful. So let's give him an armlet, because armlets tend to accentuate his already very high attack, even though they don't have amazing defense. Alright, then let's give them some decent abilities. So Sephiroth, of course, still has the same abilities he had during the last event, so those should be fine. Zack, we can give... He has what's called the Celerity School, which are agility-themed abilities that have slightly faster charge times than most combat events abilities. And he also has Spellblade, which are elemental-themed combat abilities. So let's give him Drain Strike so we can keep his HP topped up. Yuna, I think I already have as a healer plus a summoner, because I was using her as my white mage in my summoner team. Yuffie actually has, I have one of her limit breaks, Clear Tranquil from Final Fantasy VII, which serves also as an AoE heal, so she'll be my backup medic. We can give her Thief's Revenge, a 5-star thief ability. And I don't think... So normally I would give her either Dismissal, which I've already given to Zack, or Tempo Flurry, which inflicts slow, and also has 2 hits, so it can break the 9999 damage cap if the enemy has low defense. But I don't think Yunalesca is vulnerable to slow, so we'll take this just as a DPS ability. Alright, and Red 13 is what's called a support character, so he has access to black magic, since he's spec'd as a mage in this game, but he also has access to support abilities, like Full Break. Full Break lowers all of the enemy stats by 30%, unless they're resistant to it, in which case it's 15%. So generally speaking, as part of your team composition, you usually want to have a support with you to help mitigate damage coming in from the enemy by breaking all of their stats, and then by breaking whatever their primary offensive statistic is. In Yunalesca's case, her primary offensive stat is actually her mind, which a breakdown or break ability does not exist for, since she uses Holy. White magic scales off of your mind stat, so we'll just give him Magic Breakdown. Because the damage for these 4-star support abilities is still pretty high, consistent with other 4-star abilities from other physical schools. So that should be good enough for this, and the only thing we have to do now is hope that Hellbiter hits when Unileska attacks us with it. So let's, even if it doesn't, then I think it'll serve as a demonstration of how frustrating RNG mechanics can be in games, in case you aren't already somehow familiar with that. So, as usual, we'll try to use Shout as our roaming warrior because it gives us a tremendous boost to our attack and also AoE haste, which allows us to burst down Unileska as fast as possible once we've gotten our characters sapped. Maybe if we burst it down fast enough, she actually might not use Megadeth, although I doubt we'll be that fortunate. Alright, here we go. So there's nothing tricky about this fight besides the mechanics. Some of the later fights, of course, will have more convoluted requirements in order to get medals for full completion. I'll show this off probably on the backside when I start doing the Rift versions of each of these battles. Most bosses will have 3 of those conditions. Of course, Unileska only has the 1 to not be KO'd. A lot of the time, those conditions will tell you a lot about how you're supposed to approach a fight. Let's see, my battle speed is 3. That should be okay for this. Alright, so let's have Red 13 use Shout, and then we'll have Yuna use Majuin, and we'll have Yuffie use Thief's Raid just to show off how cool it is. So Thief's Raid is, I think, the second 5-star Thief ability. It does a number of hits based on the speed of the character using it, and it heals for, I think, 40% of the damage you do. And Yuffie, I think, maxes that out at level 73, which he's not quite at yet. But we'll get to see her in action. Yeah, it does a lot of damage, especially to a relatively low-level enemy like Unileska. Zac will use Dismissal, because it can actually stun the opponents and make them miss their next turn. Yeah, it's explaining the mechanic to you. So let's hope that it hits everybody, and of course it missed Red 13, so we are going to fail Mastery for this event. It is inevitable. Unless I am extremely lucky. And we can bum rush her down before she uses Megadeth, but I don't think that's possible. Yeah, there we go. So she's going to use Megadeth, Red 13 will die instantly, and we will fail Mastery for this event. So yeah, this specific battle is extremely frustrating to fight if all you want is Mastery. I personally don't really care about the rewards that you get because they're not particularly impressive, but I'll have to go back later and do this and hope eventually that Sap lands on all 5 of my team. Yeah, okay, so here we go. Everybody's sapped. She's going to use Holy. It shouldn't do that much damage. Yeah, 1350, not too bad. We can heal that with 1 Thief's Raid. And there we go. So I'll use Drain Strike, which will replenish Zac's HP. Not that he needed it because he's still at full. And yeah, so Unileska has this really cool animation that looks similar to the death animation from an actual enemy in FF10. Like I said in the previous episode, some of the later boss battles they've implemented have these unique death animations, which I think is a nice touch for the game. Anyway, there we go. See, I didn't quite get the champion. If I had gotten 1 more medal, I would have gotten there, but you lose all 3 for not defeating Unileska without being KO'd. It's kind of annoying. Alright, we get a Summon Orb. Summon Orbs are actually really rare. They're only given out during events. You can't grind them in daily dungeons like you do for the normal ability crafting pieces of material. So yeah, we got a Mithril, which is nice. I mean, that's really what I'm here for. I think the Mastery reward is just some Holy Orbs, which I have plenty of, and some more Growth Eggs, which I also have plenty of at this point. There's really no way to get around the fact that there's no unique way to mitigate the fact that Hellbiter has a chance to miss. Like, you can equip accessories that inflict sap on your characters, but there aren't enough to go around for a full team, so you're just gonna have to deal with it. Alright, so next up is Adele from Final Fantasy VIII on the 3rd span. She is also difficulty 75, so maybe it will be helpful. Let's see what her mechanics are. So yeah, Adele wields powerful magic. Every few turns she'll cast Ultima. She actually has a very long cast time for Ultima, much longer than most black magic. And in fact, much longer than most enemies do if they're black mages. Meaning that she's extremely weak to abilities like Zac's Dismissal, which have a chance of stunning the enemy and causing them to miss their turn. So she'll spend all that time charging up an ability like Ultima, only to find out that she'll be stunned and she'll miss her turn, and then she'll have to start all over again. She is also a black mage, meaning that unlike Unileska, she'll actually be weak to magic breakdown. But just in case she gets something off, I mean, she's only difficulty 75, so she shouldn't do that much damage, but Ultima has a really high damage multiplier, so just to be safe, it would probably be a nice idea to give Yuna Shelga, so that we have some defensive mitigation beyond just using magic breakdown. And I think that'll be good enough. Let's go ahead and fight Adele. We can use Shout, I guess. It shouldn't be that important, but let's be consistent with how we build our team. Okay, Shell. Since we are using a primarily physical team, it'll help us, in case things go awry, help us bum rush the boss down before anything becomes an issue, really. Alright, so yeah, so the other cool thing about this battle, this event, is that since it's the boss rush of different Final Fantasy games, you get all the different music. They have implemented nearly every like major theme from various Final Fantasy games as background music for the various events, which is pretty cool. It's a nice trip down memory lane for people who are familiar with it. And if you aren't, then you get to hear a lot of awesome music. Okay, we'll stay on speed 3, again, because this fight shouldn't be too difficult. We'll go ahead and use Shelga to buff our magic defense for the party. And then we'll start using our physical abilities. So yeah, Adele also uses Shell, which increases her resistance to magic, of course. We won't be using magic abilities, so it doesn't really matter. So yeah, check this out. So Yuffie only does about 4,000 damage, or 5,000, 6,000 damage if we use Thieves Raid without Shout Up. Of course, I was also using a Final Fantasy X weapon, so she's doing a little bit more damage due to the additional synergy, the staff boots that she gains for using a weapon from the realm that the boss fight was from. But here, we'll use Thieves Raid before and after, just to show how much of a difference that 50% increase in attack corresponds to. Plus, we've also used Full Break and Armor Break, meaning her defense is way down from what it usually would be. Yeah, go ahead. Keep using Shell. That will definitely save you from being beaten in the face by all these physical attacks. Yeah, that's way better. 3,800 damage per hit. It's basically a full HP heal for Yuffie. 4,600 heal. You can use Spellblade and Thief abilities, and I think there's also a Drain God in the Black Magic School to create a nearly self-sustaining team for some of the more difficult fights in the game. Yeah, so it says on the top, magical energy is coalescing in Adele, which means she is wasting a gigantic amount of time trying to cast Ultima, which we will never get to see because she is dead. Yep, so she also has the Final Fantasy VIII death animation. I know in the previous episode I said that nearly every enemy in the game has the Final Fantasy VI death animation, and now we've gone ahead and shown you 2 more fights that are the exception to the rule. So these bosses that we've seen during this event usually debut. Yeah, she's a black mage, so she gives a greater black orb. They usually debut as like the ultimate bonus boss for their respective event, meaning that a lot of attention goes into crafting their animations, their ability sets, their AIs, and of course their death animations, because it should feel pretty rewarding and you should get some unique visual feedback. Wow, greater summon orb, I had no idea. Again, I told you these are really rare, so anytime you get them is a kind of a nice surprise. Non-elemental orbs, and another mithril. I think every boss on the light side gives you a mithril. Usually, when there's an event, the payout is about 10 mithril if you clear everything in the event, and I think we've gotten 3 during the first few battles, and now 2 more now. We're at 3. I need 5 to make a rare relic draw. Alright, so there's one more boss that debuted during this last iteration of the Battle on the Big Bridge, and I think there's only 2 left after this. There's the first span, and then there's the Dawn Gate, which is supposed to correspond to New Year's Day. So the new boss today is Bahamut Sin. A pretty obscure, relatively compared to some of the other battles, a boss from Final Fantasy VII, specifically Final Fantasy Advent Children. There was one Final Fantasy Advent Children themed event several months ago, and Bahamut Sin, along with the 3 reunion guys, Yazoo, Laz, and Kadaj, and Sephiroth were the main villains for that event, and Bahamut Sin was the final ultimate bonus boss. So if you recall from the movie, he charges up some like giant Giga Flare style attack, and it takes the combined effort of all the heroes from Final Fantasy VII to send Cloud plunging through the energy sphere, so where he sliced Bahamut Sin in half, which is pretty cool. It was a nice climax to the second act of the movie. And Bahamut Sin works more or less the same way. He can use Mega Flare to hit the entire party, and he'll charge up his energy sphere to release Giga Flare and Petaflare attacks unless you blow up the sphere just like Cloud did in the movie. So it's kind of cool. He also summons these little guys called Shadow Creepers, who you may recall, if you watched the movie, attacked Midgar at the same time as Bahamut Sin. I think they were all actually originally summoned by Kadaj and his minions. But here, they're part of the Bahamut Sin fight. They're adds to him. In the original fight, during the Final Fantasy VII event, you actually had to kill 8 of the Shadow Creepers before you killed Bahamut Sin, and blowing up the energy sphere would do damage to them. It was super annoying, and you had to deal an awful lot of damage to get all the target scores. But this version is just a regular difficulty 90 version, with only the target score of having to beat him without being KO'd. So this shouldn't be too difficult for us, although difficulty 90 is a big step up from 75, and that's usually about the point where I start to worry about the damage output of the bosses. But with Full Break, Magic Breakdown, and Shelga, for now, we should be okay. So let's go ahead and see if I have a shout on my Roaming Warrior list. I have several because I have at least 20 or 30 shouts registered already. Planet Protector is a good stopgap if you don't have shout. It gives you the 50% attack increase without the corresponding haste Ga, but you can get the haste Ga from somewhere else. Let's go ahead and use a shout. In fact, you can also there's no haste Ga ability, but there is a regular haste, which you can just give to one of your white or black mages. Yep, check out that rocket music from Final Fantasy Advent version, I think. So yeah, let's use 19 stamina and go ahead and take down Bahamut Sin, just like Cloud did, except this time we'll be using Sephiroth. I mean, Cloud is just a cheesy ripoff of Sephiroth anyway. Too bad we don't get to listen to the music all that much. I guess I could leave the game on the menu screen for a while. Yeah, check it out. See, Kadaj actually summons Bahamut Sin as an opening animation to the fight. Hey, there's no Shadow Creepers. I could have sworn they were part of this fight. Alright, I screwed that up a little. I had Uni use Shout instead of using Shelga. We will actually get to the charging phase, I think, surprisingly early. We haven't quite gotten there yet. Unless he doesn't use it in this version of the fight. I know he uses it in the Rift version on the other side, where he charges up his energy sphere and you have to blow it up. He might not do it quite as often. I think he makes 4 energy spheres on the higher difficulty Rift version of the fight. I haven't seen him do it yet here in this lower version. There we go. So he charges Giga Flare, and you have to kill this energy sphere before he gets it off. I think it's 5 turns the first time he makes it. Let's go ahead and use Shelga from Yuna. Yeah, it'll blow up and it'll do 10,000 damage to him. So that will be extremely helpful when we're fighting him on the Rift side, and he has way more HP than he does now. Obviously, our damage output far outstrips his ability to kill us with Giga Flare at this point. But again, since I've already shown you the basics of the game, there's no particular reason for me to do anything but show off the animations of the bosses, and then eventually show you the higher level versions to illustrate to you how difficult the game gets at the high ends, and to give you some guidelines as to how to construct a high level team. Alright, there we go. So Bahamut Sin is down. If we're lucky, he'll drop something like a 4-star orb that we can add to our crafting item pool. He doesn't have a particularly interesting death animation, unfortunately, although I guess since he didn't come from a game, they don't have a game that they can just rip it off of. Nice. So, actually I was using mostly Final Fantasy VII characters without really thinking about it, so we all get a lot of bonus experience. And bonus stats. Nice. Ending complete. And we've unlocked the second span in the Rift. Some greater power orbs for making 4-star physical abilities, some wind orbs for making thief or celerity abilities, some ice orbs for making Blizzaga or something, and another mithril. Alright, so that covers a lot of the easier fights that are available to us right now. I think the next thing we want to do is to show off the structure of an event that isn't a boss rush, like the battle on the Big Bridge. So let's go ahead and go back to the home screen. Annoyingly, you can't, I think, just go back to the event screen by itself from the Battle of the Big Bridge, so there's an extra click that's not really necessary. Alright, so let's go take a look at the Final Fantasy XIV Lord of Crags event. So the 4 characters we're going to get in this event are Y'shtola, Thancred, Ida, and Papalymo. I don't know the storyline of Final Fantasy XIV all that well, except these 4 characters are part of a team called the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, which I think corresponds to the Umbral Era in the timeline of Final Fantasy XIV and its lore. Y'shtola and Thancred were actually released simultaneously in the US and the Japanese version to correspond to the release of the Heavensward expansion of Final Fantasy XIV, which meant that since there is a little bit of power creep in Record Keeper, for the US version, these 2 characters were actually a little bit ahead of the curve. Since, of course, the US version is 6 months behind the Japanese version, if we get something the Japanese version got 6 months in the future, you know, they'll be a little bit ahead of the curve compared to the other characters. On top of that, Since there isn't a lot of content for Final Fantasy XIV or other games like 11 or Final Fantasy Tactics, those characters tend to be really strong by default, even if we had gotten them on time, because otherwise you wouldn't be incentivized to bring them to events out of their native realm. So Y'shtola is one of the best white mages in the game. For example, in Tactics, Ramza is a support, and he's one of the best supports in the game. Agrias is one of the best knights in the game. And Thancred is Thancred. Alright, so let's go ahead and build a team. I'll actually get to show off Y'shtola a little bit. So, actually, part of what got me into this game originally was the first Final Fantasy XIV event. Not that I was a big fan of the game itself, but Y'shtola was the first character that I drew a personal 5-star relic for. Hey, there we go. Let's bring Y'shtola. Let's bring Thancred, because he's also a Final Fantasy XIV. So these two characters were released in the first Final Fantasy XIV event, and Ida and Papalemo are part of the team for the most recent event. It was actually a negative for Thancred, which is why I'm not particularly enthusiastic about him, because he has ninja skills, and in the Japanese client he was released at the same time as characters like Edge, and Yuffie, and Shadow, along with all of their respective abilities. Since he was released so early in the American version, that meant that there weren't a lot of ninja abilities to use with him, meaning that his utility was sort of understated compared to what it really should have been if he had been released along with the ninja school of abilities like he was supposed to be. Let's go ahead and use Kefka again, because I'm going to have one of his abilities. Let's use Ramza. And this is Final Fantasy XIV, so let's use the 14th character on my list, which is Firion? Oops. Well, I kicked Ramza out of my team, so I guess I'll just stay out. We'll keep Zack. Why not? Okay, so Thancred, I think, can use bows, so we'll leave him in the back row, even though he's a physical character. Y'shtola, so her relic is the Thyrus, which is not, I think, a particularly remarkable item from Final Fantasy XIV itself, but it has one of the two best limit breaks in the entire game, even better and more important to the construction of a long-term team than Shout, which is what frees me up to use Shout as a roaming warrior when I construct my team in the future. So I think I have one Final Fantasy XIV weapon. I think I got 2 5-star relics from the relic draw during that event. Yes, I have a bow. So let's give Thancred the bow, because it's really his time to shine. Let's give him a nice piece of armor. Let's give him... No, I've already gotten Y'shtola the Nutkin suit. I can't use that for everybody. Let's give him a shield, so he'll have a good physical defense. Since we'll be doing the beginning part of the event where the difficulty is still very low, it won't really matter how much defense he has and what his stats are. But I'd like to be able to keep this team for as long as possible. I don't have any 5-star accessories for Final Fantasy XIV. In fact, I don't think I have any accessories for the game at all. So let's just go ahead and give everybody something which will boost their most valuable stats. So for Kefka, that means magic. So I think I have a few different relics that give plus 30 magic. I think it makes the most sense to give Kefka Terra's Pendant. That is some form of poetic justice, or it could be that I'm just a big jerk. Alright, who am I missing? Zack still has equipment. Firion doesn't have equipment. Let's give him... Let's give him the gold sword. I don't remember if the gold sword was a weapon in Final Fantasy II. Firion, despite being the protagonist of Final Fantasy II, and despite being portrayed as a master of all weapon types in games like Final Fantasy Dissidia, is a little bit underwhelming in Record Keeper. There also aren't a lot of Final Fantasy 1, 2, or 3 events, just because the games are very old and they're a little bit shorter compared to the previous games. And because a lot of the games inherit from stuff that had been previously established in Final Fantasy 1, 2, or 3, so they build on 1, 2, and 3, meaning a lot of the later events just show cooler versions of bosses that were, from the older Final Fantasy games to begin with. Also, a lot of the Final Fantasy 1, 2, or 3 characters are given away in the main storyline dungeons, meaning there isn't a lot of incentive for DNA to create events based around them because they've already been given away for free. What that means is that those characters also haven't really been keeping up with the power creep, but they'll serve us well enough for getting through some low-level dungeons for a given event. So let's go ahead and give Firion some basic abilities they can use against some of the bosses while we steamroll this fight. Let's pry an ability out of Sephiroth's hands. Good night. Good night, sweet Sephiroth. I'll see you later. Alright, let's give Y'shtola the Cure Spell, because she'll be our white mage for this endeavor. Let's take it away from Yuna. There's no real point to making multiple copies of the Cure Spell. I have Curaga in addition to Curaja, and that should serve most of your healing needs. If you need to bring a secondary white mage, you can just give them a rank 3 Cure Spell and leave Y'shtola for the rank 4. For Thancred, I haven't given him any abilities yet. Again, so he can use Thief, Celerity, and I believe he can use Ninja, which is a pretty nice ability set, actually. He can use Dismissal, but I've already given it to Zac. He can use Thief's Revenge. We'll take it away from Yuffie. And let's see, what's another good ability to give him? What I'd really like to give him is an AoE attack, because that will allow us to steamroll some of the early trash battles in the event and make it go really fast. Let's do the same thing for Kefka. Again, I want to use something AoE, so let's give him Flare for bosses, which is my most powerful magic spell. And we'll give him Ruin Ga, which is an AoE, non-elemental, 4-star magic spell, which will serve to defeat most waves of trash. I think since I've got 8 uses and most events have 8 trash waves, if we just sit and wait for Kefka, he'll be able to kill everything but the boss literally by himself. Okay, so that should be good enough. Let's go ahead and show off what an event looks like in Record Keeper. So each event has 2 sides, similar to the battle on the Big Bridge. The first side consists of only 5 battles, from difficulty 2 up to difficulty 35. And if you have a good roaming warrior and you've been playing some of the regular dungeons in between, it's very easy to clear an entire front side of an event, even as a day 1 account, by using, for example, a roaming warrior with a very powerful limit break to beat the bosses if relevant. And so you can develop your character collection without really expending any additional effort to grind your team up, which is pretty nice. It gives you access to all the characters, you can pick up your favorite characters when they're available, and you can make whatever team you want. The part 2 is where you pick up, for example, the crystals that allow you to break the first limit cap. But you pick them up well before you would actually need to be level 50 or above level 50 to beat these events. So what's so cool about the structure of these events is that they really push you and they reward you with items that help you get further than you already are. So the second side is a little bit longer. There are 5 battles, just like there are on the front side, that correspond to dungeons in the game that go up to difficulty 99. And then there are 3 bonus battles, a 99 difficulty, which is usually a boss rush, a 110 difficulty, and a 120 difficulty. And these higher difficulties usually give things like 5-star abilities, and the Memory Crystal 2s that you can use to break the level 65 cap for your characters. Now, I've been using Y'shtola and Thancred for a really long time. That was the event that really got me into the game. They were actually the first characters also that I got Memory Crystal 1s for, so I had them on my team for a really long time. They've been level 65 for a really long time, and I've been eagerly awaiting the chance to get their Memory Crystal 2s so I can break their second level cap. For some reason, you get Y'shtola's in the level 99 dungeon, and you don't get Thancred's until the difficulty 120, which is kind of stupid because Thancred really needs the help. He's just not as good of a character as the other 3. But anyway, back to part 1. Let's go ahead and start with Sastasha. I don't know what that means. I don't really know these dungeons that well. I didn't play 14 far enough to get into the dungeons, but if it means something to you, fantastic. Alright, so at this early stage, we can actually, it doesn't really matter what roaming warrior we use, because we'll kill all the enemies in one hit anyway. So let's go ahead and just pick something from the random part of my followers list. Maybe we'll use it at the end of a dungeon on the boss, just to see what it looks like. Alright, so there's no boss here. You can see there's 3 waves of trash, each of which contain 3 rounds and cost 2 stamina. Let's go ahead and start. Again, since this is only difficulty 2, there's really no way for me to make this look difficult. But I've never actually shown a trash fight in this game. So the boss of this dungeon, Sastasha, I think is Dean the Orca-Toothed, who's some kind of a merman. You don't fight him in this battle, but I think you do in one of the subsequent battles of this event. So yeah, I'm just auto-battling. I can actually increase the speed up to fast and make it go a little faster. But sometimes that does a little weird thing, a little bit, that makes the ATB system of the game behave a little bit oddly. Especially if you have, for example, an accessory. There are accessories in the game that dramatically increase your damage output, but inflict the sap status. I think Zac has one on right now. And sometimes that makes the sap poison tick really fast. much faster than it should, and it gets a little bit scary, almost. So you can have a character lose 40% of their HP in a dungeon that would otherwise be trivial to beat, just from the like super fast asaptics if you increase the battle speed too high. I think something similar happened in games like the original Final Fantasy IV, especially the Game Boy Advance remake of it, that if you had a character who was really fast, sometimes they would supersede other characters, even if like they would jump in front of them in the battle order, just because their ATB was filling up so fast and the game had an odd priority system. Alright, so for the future dungeons, I think I won't show all of the trash mobs. I think I'll just show the boss, because this will get boring pretty fast. I will say that, just as an estimate, it takes probably about an hour, if you're relatively high level, to clear an entire event, assuming you don't have to spend too much time thinking about your party composition. That includes getting up to the 99 difficulty dungeon, the 5th dungeon on the part 2, and then maybe thinking about possibly clearing some of the bonus battles. So yeah, having that Final Fantasy XIV bow on Thancred will be quite a big help for clearing some of these trash mobs really fast. To do 9999 like that all the time from the back row would be pretty useful. This game does have standard Final Fantasy back row mechanics. You do take half damage from non-range physical attacks if you're in the back row. There are a handful of... being in the back row, the positioning of the enemy on their side usually doesn't matter. Occasionally there will be a fight where that is an actual mechanic. I think, weirdly enough, the Final Fantasy Tactics event, actually, one of the battles against Ygraf used the back row mechanics where Ygraf would hide behind like a white mage and a black mage, some 2 generic units, which is weird because Final Fantasy Tactics is the only game, one of the only games which is a part of Record Keeper that actually doesn't use the traditional ATB battle system and doesn't use front or back row mechanics. So the fact that somehow Ygraf, who plays in is from a tactical game, would actually use the back row, it's kind of weird. Doesn't really make sense to me. I kind of wonder if the game is almost making fun of itself by giving him that mechanic. Alright, so now that we've killed several waves of these Bleen guards, we've cleared the 3rd wave of the 3rd round of this first battle of the dungeon. I really like that even though we've like trivially curb stomped all the enemies in this dungeon, we get this like soaring choral version of the Final Fantasy victory music, which is indigenous to Final Fantasy XIV. I really feel like I've accomplished something here today by beating the bloody hell out of these level 2 enemies. Oh yeah, so we've unlocked the 2nd part of Sastasha. So for a game like Final Fantasy XIV where they haven't implemented a lot of content, it does tend to feel a little spread out. Oh yeah, so if you already have the character that an event gives out as a reward, you get a Greater Growth Egg, which is worth 50,000 experience. So especially for this, a level 2 dungeon to get a 50,000 experience point egg to give to your characters is a pretty big deal. You also get a 3-star sword corresponding to that realm, so if you don't have equipment at all for this realm, you can equip your characters a little bit better with some weapons, and you get 40 lesser growth eggs to level your characters up, on top of the Greater Growth Egg that you might get if you already have Ishtola. And you get a Mithril, because why not? So, I don't think I'll show every single battle in this event, since I've already shown off the structure. Yeah, so I didn't even get to use this Soul Break. I'll show this at some point. But I've also got 5 Mithril now, which will enable me to use a Relic Draw. So, every time you visit the Relic Draw page, you'll see all these banners that correspond to events that are going on right now. So, for example, I mentioned previously there's a Nightmare Dungeon. There's a special half-price draw that corresponds specifically to the emergence of the Nightmare Dungeon for this given month. You can only draw once on it, and I haven't done that yet, so we'll save that for later. You also get 1 free relic draw, which is a very high % chance of being a simple 1-star relic, although technically you can draw literally anything in the game. Let's go ahead and do that, because I haven't done it for today. There we go. I think the odds of getting a 5-star relic, any relic from the 5-star pool, is 1 in 10,000. So, yeah, most of the time you'll just get this brown orb, which is a 1-star relic, or a 2-star relic. What is this? For some reason, there's a huge amount of like really crummy Final Fantasy XII equipment in this in Record Keeper. So the fact that I didn't get any of that is actually kind of surprising. This is a Sonic Knuckles, which I don't think I have. A Final Fantasy III weapon. I don't really need it because it's actually better at this point just to use a generic 5-star weapon. But what I'd really like to show off is this piece here, the Soul Breakout. So during the first episode I mentioned there was a new tier of limit break in the game called Burst Soul Break. So you can see here, they've debuted on this banner a new Burst Soul Break. So this Soul Breakout has 5 phases. It's like an all-star relic draw where the jackpot of the event is full of the best relics with the most utility from all the previous banners. It corresponds to the emergence of the battle on the big bridge. So just like you have an all-star boss rush, you also have an all-star random draw. So all of these relics are very high tier. Any of them would make a great addition to your team. So if you happen to have Mithril and you really want to spend it, one of these Burst Soul Break banners is a great place to do it if you happen to be starting the game now. Or if you are continuing to play the game and you happen to have some Mithril sitting on hand. So the general structure is there are 5 of these banners. Each one has 1 or 2 Burst Soul Breaks for a given character. And then there are 2 or 3 Super Soul Breaks, which are the next level below Burst. So here we've got 1 for Selfie, 1 for Red 13, 1 for Shadow, and then we've got a bunch of regular Soul Breaks that have a high degree of utility. So for Yuna, it's an AoE heal. For Yuffie, this is the Clear Tranquil that I have. It's also an AoE heal. And then for Riku, this is the Fist that she has. This is a 50%, on top of doing damage, it does a 50% decrease in attack to the enemy and a 40% decrease in attack for Riku. And then there's Eris's Keepsake Ribbon, which gives the Planet Protector limit break. And then there's Cypher's Coat, which is a 50% resistance up plus pretty good damage. So all of these are awesome relics. However, you only have a 13% chance, I believe, of drawing a 5-star relic, no matter what the banner is. So let's go ahead and take our chances. I think about 70% of the time, oops, apparently I have too many items. Why does this always happen to me right when I'm about to show something off? So yeah, since I did a crummy early event in a dungeon, the really low-level dungeons do have a bad habit of dropping a lot of 1-star relics. So I have been drawing actually on this banner several times already in the last couple of days while it's been available. I've got a whole bunch of 3-star junk. The rare relic draw is guaranteed to give you at least a 3-star, but at this point in my file, 3 stars don't really improve my team all that much. So most of the time I just sell them. Alright, so I'm doing this basically just to show off the relic draw mechanics. I wouldn't normally do this during a Record Keeper video. Alright, give me something good. So that shine means I just got a white orb, which is a 3-star, gold orb is 4-star, and the 5 stars are rainbow orbs, and they make this huge screen-shaking effect when they appear. So I knew already before it emerged that it wasn't a 5-star. This is the Magus robe. I think I actually have like 3 of these combined into a 5-star version. So I don't need this. I'll sell it later. Alright, so I think this is a good place to stop. I mostly wanted to just clear the front side of the battle on the big bridge and show you the structure of the general event. So I think in the next episode I'll show you some of the more difficult battles in the Dawn over the Big Bridge, and also some of the bonus battles from Lord of the Crags. So I'll be happy to see you again during the next episode of Let's Play Final Fantasy Record Keeper. I'll see you then.